For nearly 60 years, the Porsche 911 has been the quintessential sports car in which other sports cars are benchmarked against. For 2020, Porsche has introduced an all-new version of the 911, now in its 8th generation, dubbed internally as the 992 generation. Now, the beauty about the 911 is Porsche tends to offer several different variants of this model, starting of course from the base Carrera to a Carrera S to a Carrera GTS. However, the 911 turbo models have always been just that little bit extra to bring the 911 from sports car territory all the way up to supercar territory. For 2021, the 911 Turbo is back, and it's back with even more horsepower this year. Porsche has replaced the previous 3.8-liter flat six with a new 3.8-liter flat six, now making 572 horsepower, or up 32 ponies versus the previous generation 911 Turbo. So if you're looking for an even faster 911 that takes you from sports car levels to supercar levels while still preserving the ability to daily drive it every day, how does this new 2021 Turbo model stack up? Stay tuned to find out. So there was a time where a Porsche 911 Turbo badge actually meant that the vehicle was the only model to get a turbocharged engine. However, as you guys know, about 5 years ago, Porsche changed that when all the 911 models became turbocharged, including the base Carrera model. So when you see a turbo badge on the back of a 911, it essentially means you get a bigger engine, more horsepower, and more boost from the turbos. This is essentially the model that's designed to go head-to-head with something like a McLaren, like a Lamborghini, like a Ferrari, and of course an Audi R8. Now, I should also point out there is a higher performing Turbo S available, which offers 640 horsepower. This one here is the one that's not quite on sale yet. It'll be going on sale in the spring, but it's technically the same motor as the Turbo S, detuned by about 70 horsepower. However, it's $30,000 cheaper. So similar performance. Porsche says it's only 0.1 seconds slower 0 to 60, and you essentially still get all of the comfort, luxury, technology, and horsepower of the Turbo S model. Now let's start with the styling of the 992 generation 911, because I haven't actually shown you guys the new look of this vehicle. And in typical Porsche fashion, they didn't really change too much with the design. It's a very evolutionary, very playing it safe design. The biggest thing you're going to notice is the new cut lines in the hood of this vehicle. You can see it's got a square cut line here. It's very distinctive. Some people have told me that they don't like the way it looks. It's growing on me. I didn't like it at first when I first saw this vehicle. You can see the standard LED headlights here have the 4-point matrix dot LEDs, which are standard equipment. This particular one here has the black accented headlight. They also have adaptive headlights, so they swivel side to side when you turn the wheel, and they also have automatic high beams. This particular one here also is a European spec model. You can tell from the European front plate. So it does have a few key differences here versus the American version of this car. Porsche also sent me this vehicle with the Sport Design package with the black accents. You can see Sport Design package here. It's got a slightly different front fascia. You have LED turn signals here, and then your 4-point LED daytime running lights. And then some of the flaps in here you can see are functional. Actually, at speed, if you guys put this thing into Sport Plus, there's a flap here that comes down in the front splitter to kind of help with aerodynamics. That again brings it down and actually exposes a turbo badge, a 911 turbo badge down there, which is again very, very German, very distinctively Porsche. So I think overall the design is certainly attractive. Now, one of the other attractive areas about a 911 is the fact that this vehicle is so damn practical for it being a sports car, supercar. So for example here, no engine. Remember, the 911 has a water-cooled engine that's at the back of the vehicle. But when you open up the front of this car, you get around 5 cubic feet of space. And as you can see, it is a very deep trunk. You can easily fit 2 roller bags in here if you guys are, traveling. It also is very deep to the point where I could almost get into this vehicle. However, I wouldn't want to close it on me, but it's nicely finished. Porsche, again, has always been very good about preserving the practicality of this vehicle. So unlike your McLaren or your Ferrari, you can actually daily drive this vehicle because it has decent trunk space, and I haven't even shown you guys the inside yet. Now, when you look at the rest of the side profile of the new 911, you can see very much playing it safe with the design. Porsche actually didn't even make the new one bigger in terms of the wheelbase. It still has a 96.5-inch wheelbase, which is the same as last year's 991.2 generation. Porsche did make it at about an inch longer, at around 178 inches long. This is actually about 4 inches longer than the Audi R8 V10 that I drove last year, but it's a little bit smaller than something like an Acura NSX or a Nissan GT-R, which again competes head-on with the 911 Turbo. Now, my particular tester here also has the standard 911 Turbo wheel. They actually are staggered wheels, so you have a 20-inch wheel in the front, a 21-inch wheel in the back, 245 width tires in the front, and even fatter 315 wide tires in the back. You can see these are the standard brakes that you get with the 911 Turbo. They're a 15-inch rotor cross-drilled with 6-piston calipers here. If you guys want, you can spec in the carbon ceramic brakes for $10,000 extra. It'll actually upgrade the rotors and the caliper to a 10-piston design. That actually comes standard on the Turbo S, so that's again where the extra money is coming from with the Turbo S. This particular one here also has the sport suspension that does drop the ride height by about 0.4 inches or about 10 millimeters. So again, already low car. Thankfully, to kind of mitigate the fact that it's low, Porsche also offers a front axle lift system, which my tester has. It'll raise it up by about 1.5 inches to help clear those obstacles if you guys are trying to get this thing up a driveway, so keep that in mind. Now, my tester again also has the carbon fiber roof option. This is like $3,000 extra. Personally, this is not a light vehicle. Get a GT3 if you want the lightest 911. So I would probably skip this option, even though it looks good with the racing yellow. I would get the glass panoramic roof option for $2,000, which again would give you more light in the cabin. It'll give you an opening, functioning sunroof. Now, a couple of other things I want to point out. The sport design package on my tester also gives you kind of the black accents here that kind of pop out. This right here is a functional air intake, of course, for the engine. It's a rear-mounted water-cooled engine, as you guys know, so this is a functional air intake. And then you can see here the door handle is flush with the vehicle. However, when I try to touch this, you can see the door handle pops up. It's kind of very Tesla-like, and if you lock the vehicle, the door handle will close. So again, that's a pretty cool, feature. Again, Porsche is trying to make the new 911 a little bit more technologically advanced and make it a little bit more progressive and different versus the previous generation. Now, coming over to the rear of the vehicle, you can see the spoiler is very noticeable on the turbo model. And actually, compared to the one you get on like a GT3 RS, it is rather subdued. This one here, having the sport design package, means the spoiler is slightly higher. This black portion here actually pops up at speed, or you can also manually adjust it to make it pop out, which makes the turbo look even better. I also have these dark tinted taillights here, the clear tinted taillights, which look good. Porsche again has been doing this continuous light blade on the taillight for the last couple of years. You can see the sport design package also changes out the rear diffuser. You also have the optional sport exhaust for $3,500. It sounds pretty good. However, this one here is the European spec model, which means it's got some kind of restrictor on it for emissions, and it only revs up to 3,500, but I'll fire it up and let you guys hear what it sounds like. So for the first time ever, Porsche is offering the sport exhaust system on just the regular turbo. This one has it, so let's fire it up and hear how it sounds. Now, key thing to point out, the American versions of this car will be louder, so this European spec model is a little bit quieter. I'm a little disappointed with the noise from out here, but we'll drive the car later on and we'll show you guys how it really sounds. Now, underneath this little rear area, which by the way, to open it, you have to come back here and pull this little switch. This is basically all you can see with the motor on this vehicle. Remember, the engine itself isn't really serviceable by normal people. You have to take this to a Porsche dealer or have a Porsche technician service the engine, because this is all you can see. And there's a big 3.8 turbo badge there. However, you should know that the engine's displacement is actually 3.745 liters. So technically it's a 3.7 liter twin turbo flat six. This is actually a new engine versus last year's model. It's based off of the same architecture as the 3-liter turbo flat six in the regular 911. The previous generation had a different block. However, the turbos in this one are slightly smaller. You have twin symmetrical turbochargers on this flat six with direct injection. Porsche says you get 572 horsepower and 553 pound-feet of torque. That's an increase of 32 horsepower versus last year's model, and it basically makes the same power as the previous generation Turbo S, which offered 580 horsepower. If you guys want more power, the Turbo S ramps things up to 640 horsepower, so you get nearly 70 more horsepower. All the turbo models come with an 8-speed PDK, so it has an extra gear versus last year, and Porsche also beefed it up to handle the extra power. All-wheel drive is going to be standard on all the turbo models, so with launch control and the Sport Chrono package that comes standard, Porsche says you'll basically get to 60 in 2.7 seconds, and you'll reach a top speed of 199 miles an hour. So basically 200 miles an hour, and fuel economy is actually not too terrible. It's rated at 15 in the city, 20 on the highway. You better put premium gas in this thing. I actually managed to get a little over 20 miles to the gallon on the highway when I drove this thing on a longer trip. Combine it with a 20-gallon gas tank and you're looking at 450 miles of range, which is unheard of for a sports car, supercar like this. The 911 turbos are relatively heavy. However, this does weigh the same as last year's model at around 3,535 pounds. So now that we've gotten past the fact that the exterior of the 992 generation Porsche 911 doesn't look all that different versus the previous generation, let's look inside, because I haven't showed you guys a full interior overview of this generation 911 yet. And this is where Porsche really made several upgrades. This has one of the nicest cabins in the industry in terms of tech, in terms of comfort, in terms of luxury. I do want to point out, however, my tester has the standard sport bucket seats with the red leather. It's a very boring looking interior. I would never get just this drab black interior. You can also jazz it up with yellow stitching if you'd like, which would complement nicely the racing yellow. Or you can also take your pick between several individual options for the interior, from like a brown, a red, a white leather, a Sport Tex option, and you can also get 18-way power seats. Adding insult to injury, my tester here is over $200,000 and I actually don't have full power seats. So that's kind of unacceptable considering the price of this vehicle. But once you step inside, looking at the rest of the cabin, you can see, if you're not familiar with traditional or with Porsches as of late, this is going to again feel very, very foreign to you. It is relatively easy to use once you get used to all the controls and such that Porsche does. They've really been upgrading their tech over the years. You can see a large 11-inch display here, or technically it's 10.9 inches, and then you have a central tack here and two 7-inch displays that flank each side of the tack, which definitely looks nice. The door panel, you can see there is some nice genuine stitching over here. My tester has the 12-speaker Bose stereo, which sounds okay. I'd highly recommend going to the Burmester option for $4,000 if you guys are a huge audiophile. There's basically nice leather covering the door panel, which is what you expect in this kind of vehicle. When I shut the door has a nice solid sounding thunk. So remember, Porsche, they are over engineered, so you're going to basically expect that when you get into this vehicle. Now I do want to talk about these seats. You can also get an option where you could put like the turbo badge there on the actual headrest, the Porsche crest on the headrest. These seats are kind of the base seats. You can see they kind of have like a fabric material in the center, which holds you a little bit more, and then this leather material. What really bugs me is the fact that these seats are 4-way power, so I can electrically adjust the seat up and down in one direction or the recline forward and back. But if I want to move the seat forward, it's actually a manual lever here. On a car that's $200,000, it's just annoying. It should be standard. For some reason, you still have to pay extra for it. These seats, however, I took it on a 2-hour drive. These are one of the most comfortable seats that I've ever sat in for a sports car, and the interior just feels open. It feels airy. It feels roomy, which is definitely a characteristic of a 911. Now here's the key fob for the vehicle. You can see it is the standard Porsche key. It kind of looks like a car. This key is slightly updated versus my 718 came in from 2 years ago. I kind of wish Porsche would do something a little bit cooler with the key, but nevertheless, you know, $200,000 car, the key looks like every other Porsche key. And Porsche doesn't do a button to start the engine. Instead, they put it over here on the left side, and you have this little pacifier-like thing, switch that you twist over to the left. This is standard. Typically this is part of Porsche entry and drive. Sometimes they charge you extra for that, but my tester, thankfully, because it's a turbo, that is at least standard. So foot on the brake and then you just twist this to the left like it's an ignition key. And you can hear when the car starts up, it doesn't really sound like that much. I mean, yes, it has the typical flat 6 howl that we know and like. It does have a sport exhaust system. This is the first time we have sport exhaust on a turbo model. Push that button here, you can hear it gets a little bit louder, or you can also just change the drive mode over to Sport or Sport Plus. Sadly, this one here being a European spec model, it does limit your revs to only 3,500 while you're in park. And I believe the European spec models also have a particulate filter, which actually makes it a little bit quieter. The US spec models, whenever I drive that, will have a slightly louder exhaust. So the exhaust isn't really that impressive when you first hear it, which is, again, the whole point of a 911 Turbo. If you want something that sounds like a race car, you have to wait for the GT3, which Porsche will be showing off later on. Now let's look at the rest of this interior. You can see Porsche does really high quality stuff here. You have real genuine leather over the dash, over this part of the dash, even over the airbag cover. The genuine leather extends and continues down here. You can see typical Porsche fashion. You have these pop out cup holders here, which this is just kind of a hard touch plastic, but that's expected. You have this matte finish carbon fiber trim that my tester has for like another $2,000, which does make the cabin look nice, although I would probably spec something like aluminum to brighten up this cabin versus the dark on dark. The steering wheel you can see here is a manual tilt telescoping wheel. You can get a power wheel if you guys spec in the 18-way power adjustable seats with 3-person memory. This one here doesn't have it, so it's a manual seat. The steering wheel actually looks, you know, nice. It's got some Alcantara here, which is good. I'd probably skip this because this will look like crap after a few years. It is a heated wheel. Porsche puts the heated button back here behind the steering wheel, and then it tells you when the switch is on and off. This is again part of Porsche's dynamic drive mode selector, where you can toggle between the different drive modes. There's wet, sport plus, sport, normal, and then an individual mode where you can adjust. The wet mode is something new for this generation 911. It's got sensors that can sense when you're driving through water, and it'll kind of tailor back the stability control, the throttle, to make it safer to drive when you guys are driving in the wet. I don't particularly like the paddles. They are metal, but they are a little bit smaller. I also kind of wish they were a brighter finish. The wheel itself is just too dark. I actually prefer the old wheel that Porsche used on the previous generation, 991.2. 911 just looked a little bit nicer to me. Your headlight controls are back here. You have, you know, very nice high quality feeling turn signal stalks and wiper stalks and whatnot. The center stack over here you can see houses this large 10.9-inch display. It's practically 11 inches. This is part of the Porsche Connect head unit. It does include wireless CarPlay, but for some reason my European spec model, the wireless CarPlay wasn't working on my phone, so I actually have to plug it in. I was trying to see if I could make this CarPlay screen take up the entire screen, but it won't let me do that. I can only take up the entire screen if I take it out of CarPlay, for example, go to GPS here, and that'll take up the whole screen. You can see it doesn't really know where I am right now because it thinks I'm supposed to be in somewhere in Europe or in Germany or something like that. The center stack here, or the instrument panel, you can see has a central tachometer, which looks good, and then 2 7-inch displays that flank each side of it. You can control it via this little toggle here, where Porsche lets you show all your usual information, your trip computer information. You can see you can put the GPS there, which looks really nice. My tester also has the night view assistance for $2,500, and that's where it'll show you what's, you know, in front of you when you're driving at night. You can also push this little button here and you can change this one, the speedometer, which is a little bit more simple versus the right side of the instrument panel. That's just what I have it on, the driver assistance feature. I kind of wish that Porsche would just give us an all digital display. I mean, the central tack is nice, the analog tack, but I think just an all digital display would have looked a little bit better. That's what the Porsche Taycan has, where you have the display here, the display here, the display there, which is optional, and then a display down here. The 911 doesn't allow you to put the display there or here. Now, speaking of which, down here you can see you have your front lift spoiler over here. If I push this button, it actually will raise the front end by about 1.5 inches, so it clears. This is extra. It's part of like a $2,500 front axle lift system. It can actually save the position, so it always knows to do that. My tester also has the Porsche dynamic chassis control, where I can change the dampers to a normal or a sport. The buttons and knobs here just feel really high quality. That's kind of what you expect with a lot of Porsche products. I really like the way this feels, and Porsche has been getting rid of all the crazy amount of buttons that they had in the previous generation. Instead, we have this black panel here with piano black, which shows, you know, dust and fingerprints, so I don't love that. You have a volume knob, tuning knob over here. This interesting stubby thing is the gear lever for the 8-speed PDK. Some people don't like it. Some people much prefer the old shifter. You can, of course, get a 7-speed manual, not in the turbo, but in the S models. So I would highly recommend doing that if you guys prefer a traditional, you know, shift it yourself 911. To go into reverse, you push this little thing all the way up. You can see my tester has the surround view camera system for like an extra $1,000, which does have very good views. It has parking sensors, it has a panoramic view, it has a side view, several different angles. So again, the tech features are great, just as long as you're willing to pay extra for them. Pull it into drive, you just kick it all the way back. You can also change this look of this to be an aluminum or carbon fiber shifter if you'd like. This just looks really funny, but it is relatively easy to get used to using it once you actually have it. My tester has heated seats, no ventilated seats. You can spec that in as like a $740 a la carte option. And then you can see there's a regular cup holder over here, which Porsche in general doesn't really do too much in terms of cup holders. It's just this one and that one, so not great in terms of storage space, which is, you know, characteristic of a Porsche. This is nice and padded here. You can see this is optional, the Porsche crest here on the center console for like $600. Open this up. It is a relatively shallow center console, but you can see I fit my wallet, my iPhone 12 Pro Max in there. You have a USB, 2 USB ports, in there. I have to plug it in right now because the wireless function isn't working. The center console, or the glove box you can see here, is damped. It's lined with felt. It's a pretty good size actually for a sports car, supercar. And then my tester, having the carbon fiber roof, has this nice suede Alcantara here. I would probably dump the carbon fiber roof, get the glass panoramic sunroof, because that would let in a lot more light. And then back here you can see there is back seat still in 911 fashion, but you can delete that back seat if you guys want to save a little bit of weight. My tester also has the lightweight glass and insulated glass for like an extra $1,000. Supposedly it saves 8 pounds, but on a vehicle that weighs 3,500, 3,600 pounds already, it seems a little pointless to me. But overall, the cabin is very, very nice. It's very comfortable, really easy to see out of. It has all the tech as long as you're willing to pay for it, but I think Porsche needs to seriously start offering more tech as standard, as opposed to making you pay extra for it, versus all of its competitors, which throw it in for you, at no extra charge. Now, one of the selling factors with a 911 and being able to sell it to your spouse is the fact that this thing technically has a back seat. Now, the back seat is probably reserved for your mother-in-law, kids, or people you don't like. So let me get back here. Now, I do appreciate the fact that the seats are manual when you're trying to get back here, because it's a little quicker to actually move the seat. And at 5'7", I'm pretty short, but as you can see, I have to crane my neck over to the left. And this seat is really narrow. Like, I'm not a fat person, guys, and I feel really constricted in this. So somebody who's really wide, you're not gonna be comfortable back here. This is literally reserved for kids or for packages. Your best bet really is to fold this seat down. You can see when you fold it down, Porsche says you get around 9.3 cubic feet of space back here, which is really nice. So the back seat, technically you could use it. It has seat belts back here for 2 people. You just wouldn't want to put anyone back here unless you really don't like them. All right, so Porsche 911s, we all know this vehicle as the quintessential sports car that every other sports car is measured against. I mean, I had a Porsche 718 Cayman GTS for 2 years. I drove a 991, the pre-refreshed model. I also drove a 997 several years ago. And I've always aspired to own a 911. I mean, as an enthusiast, that's what people aspire to own, are 911s. It's the sports car that everybody measures up against. So when the 992 came out last year, the 8th generation model, some people criticize Porsche for making it, or for playing it safe. I, on the other hand, think that Porsche plays it safe because people who buy these vehicles don't want these big changes. They want small incremental changes, because the 911's always been that vehicle that is just so incredibly well engineered. It's just so incredibly balanced. Now, granted, this is not a mid-engine sports car like the Cayman is. This is still the rear engine, water-cooled engine, obviously. It's been that way for years already. But now that Porsche has loaned me the turbo version, this is not the Turbo S, so it's not the highest spec version. It's down about 70 horsepower, but the boost of this thing, oh my God. Like, I haven't even tried the launch control yet, which I'll get to, but Porsche delivered it to me with winter tires because, as you can see, there's snow everywhere. We just got hammered with nearly a foot of snow on the ground, but this car is just absolutely intense. With 572 horsepower, this has basically the same power as last year's, or the 992.1 Turbo S, which had 580 horsepower. Porsche basically says 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds with the standard Sport Chrono package. Remember, an 8-speed PDK is standard, and it has an extra gear versus last year's transmission, and it is beefed up for the turbo, because remember, this engine, with its twin symmetrical turbos, 3.8 liters, it's technically 3.7 liters in displacement, and around 3,600 pounds of weight. This is supposed to be a supercar that you can drive every day. And of course, there's the ongoing debate, is a 911 Turbo considered a supercar? Because, this particular one here, painted in this shade of racing yellow, definitely stands out a lot more than a regular 911 would. I mean, I had an Audi R8, a McLaren, compared to, an NSX even, this is rather subdued. Oh, Jesus Christ. And even without trying the launch control, when the boost kicks in this thing, it is just brutal. Absolutely brutal. And I will say that the noise of this engine, this is a 3-point, it's a flat 6. It sounds like a flat 6. I like the sound it makes, but it's not quite as loud as something like the V10 and the R8 or the Lamborghini, of course. Even the McLaren V8 has more noise to it, although I do appreciate the gurgles and the pops of this vehicle. The PDK is so good. I mean, listen to the way it rev matches. Oh, even the first gear there. Oh, the shifts are just lightning fast, and the burbles. Okay, it does sound good, but could it be louder? Yes. Oh. But, you buy this type of vehicle because, for one, it has a back seat that's not really usable, but you can fold it down to give you 9 cubic feet of space, and you could put kids in it in a pinch. You've got a frunk that offers 5 cubic feet of space. You've got an interior that feels relatively roomy. It has really good tech in it, and the visibility in this vehicle is excellent. Really good visibility. You get Porsche's, automatic emergency braking and lane departure alert as standard. My tester has the Innovation Drive package, so it has the lane keep assist, the adaptive cruise control with traffic jam assist. Those technologies were available on the previous generation 911, but Porsche's kind of taken it to the next level. It's still not what I would say like Cadillac Super Cruise or Tesla Autopilot, but it does a pretty good job because remember, Porsche is all about driving. Driving is what you want, what matters when you buy a Porsche. And the reason why Porsche sells and builds so many Macans and Cayennes is so they can build better 911s. And I think they've nailed it almost with this new generation model. It feels so refined. I mean, even in regular mode here, it's got adaptive dampers. Even in sport mode right now, or the chassis is in normal right now, it still rides so well. I can put it into sport over here, and gets a little firmer, but it's not overly harsh. Some sports cars that I drove, like the Audi R8, I had a really, rough ride at times, but this doesn't feel rough. It feels really good. But, I mean, this is just a car that you can daily drive and have, blisteringly quick acceleration. And fuel economy is not horrible. 15, 20 mpg. I averaged around 15 on the highway. It will do at 20 mpg. I got 20 on the highway, which is not bad considering the performance this car gives you. And with the standard rear wheel steering and the PASM suspension, you feel like this new generation turbo can really handle well nowadays. So it's very, very impressive. Now, engaging the launch control in this vehicle is really easy. Just put it in Sport Plus or Sport mode, floor the brake and the accelerator. Now, sadly, I can't do a complete all-out launch in this car right now because the roads are damp. The roads are damp even with all-wheel drive. It's kind of struggling to put the power down because it also has winter tires on it. So I'll have to see if I can wait till another day to do the launch control in this vehicle because I hear it's one of the most brutal launches ever. But as you can see, sadly, the damn roads are damp. So I can't get full traction in this car right now, even with the all-wheel drive. It just has way too much horsepower and torque. So I'm heading a little further south because I want to be able to try out the 911 Turbo in better road conditions. And as you can see, the temperature outside is around 57, so it's about 15 degrees warmer versus where I was up in Pennsylvania. But since I'm out on the highway, I thought I would show you guys Porsche's adaptive cruise control and their Innovation Drive. Now, I do want to show you guys the Innovation Drive option since my tester has it. However, the sad thing is that one I'm driving is a European spec car. And because it's a European spec car, it doesn't have a working GPS in it. It also doesn't have working satellite radio because it thinks that it knows that I'm in the US, but it thinks that I'm supposed to be in Germany. It's calibrated, I guess, for Europeans' regulations and such. So when I try to turn on the Innovation Drive, it just tells me that it's unavailable. So right now, I've got the adaptive cruise control and the lane keep assist active. And Porsche did upgrade it this year because it will follow the cars in front of you to a complete stop. It doesn't lane change for you though, although I want to say the Innovation Drive feature does, but I can't test it now, so I'll have to wait until I can test it at a later date where it's actually working. But you can see here, going around this curve, the car does keep pretty well centered in the lane. Not quite as good as some of the other competing systems that I've tested. but it does a pretty good job. I really am curious to try out the Innovation Drive feature whenever I get a US spec car to test, because this car is just a really amazing daily driver just as a cruiser. The other thing I'm also noticing, 21.8 mpg, almost 22 miles to the gallon in something like this with almost 600 horsepower, yet it also has the ability to do this. It has so much FU power in this thing, and it's got one of the most responsive dual clutches ever. Ooh. Oh yeah, I'm a believer. There's a reason why this car isn't quite as obnoxious as its competitors, because it is so stealth. Aside from this frickin' bright yellow color, it looks like I'm driving just a regular 911. So the first launch control was a little bit of a dud, but thankfully I found a road that's dry, and this is the same place where I did the launch control in the NSX. Really easy in the 911. Floor the brake in the accelerator, Sport Plus. Oh God. Holy crap. Ooh. Speechless. Wow. Oh yeah, we have to try that again. Wow. Oh my God, that was intense. That was brutal. Absolutely brutal. All right. Oh! Oh my God. Porsche says 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds. You know what? That is definitely the most brutal launch that I felt this year. Now granted, it's only February, but not very many cars can top that. Even Teslas, the performance Teslas, although I haven't driven a performance Model S, or let alone the Plaid that's coming out. Oh my God, that felt like 2.5 seconds. Actually, the quickest I've seen a Turbo S get to 60 is 2.2 seconds via Car and Driver. This is probably just 0.1 second behind that. That's 2.3, 2.4 seconds. The G-force that I'm feeling, that I felt when the car launched hard, literally made my stomach feel a little sick. That was intense. Wow. And you would never suspect a car like this could accelerate this hard, but this is faster to accelerate than an Audi R8 that I drove, the Mercedes-AMG GTR, the McLaren GT, the Acura NSX. This is all faster than them. Wow. Bravo, Porsche. Bravo. So being able to spend the last couple of days with the latest generation Porsche 911 is a privilege that I never really thought I would have the opportunity to experience. But I have to say, after spending a couple days with the 911 Turbo, this is, remember, not the highest performing turbo model. However, still, it's a 911 with nearly 600 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. It has lived up to my expectations of a Porsche 911. There's a reason why every manufacturer benchmarks their sports car against this, because really it's the most comfortable sports car you can buy. It's the most luxurious sports car. It has the most space on the inside. It gets the best gas mileage. It has the most cargo room, and it also has impeccable build quality. I mean, this thing right here stickers for $220,000 with the options that my tester has. And really, I'm trying my best to find faults with this car. And really, I guess it's only going to come down to the fact that it's bloody expensive, which it's a Porsche 911, I expect that. The base turbo model starts at $170,000. A base 911, a Carrera, starts at around $100,000. So again, this is not a cheap date. However, if you guys can afford it, the 911 has plenty to like. Really, if my one criticism about it is if you were going to compare this thing to supercars like a Lamborghini, like a McLaren, like a Ferrari, like an Audi R8, like an Acura NSX, it's the fact that the 911 is a little bit too subdued. It's a car that really flies under the radar. Only enthusiasts are going to know you're driving something that's truly special, because to other people it just looks like a standard 911. But if that's what you want, that's precisely the reason why you buy one of these, because it is so understated, yet it's so fast, yet it's so comfortable, yet it gets good gas mileage. And there's a reason why Porsche manages to sell around 10,000 of these in America every year, because everybody just wants one of these. As a kid, as an adult, it makes for the perfect sports car, and that's precisely why so many manufacturers try to do their best to copy what Porsche has done. But speaking of which, my tester here, with all the options that it has, from the sport design package the optional wheels, to the carbon fiber roof, to the upgraded surround view camera system, stickers for $220,000. And to be honest, at $220,000, I think it's too expensive considering the fact that I don't have the full power seats and memory seats and cooled seats and a sunroof. I think Porsche could consider making more equipment as standard on this vehicle considering the price tag. However, if you spec in an 911 turbo with everything, you can get the price to be around $250,000, which technically it's still cheaper than a Ferrari and a Lamborghini competitor. So with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the 2021 Porsche 911 Turbo. It is damn expensive, but you can afford it. It's one of the most comfortable supercars that you could daily drive on an everyday basis. And if you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.